Shadows, the horror movie heroes. By Clouds, My Head in the Clouds Not Coming Down. Read by Oak Shadow 5. Chapter 11. Last Minute. Summary. The villains prepare for the heroes to arrive. Hitoshi kept his hands in his pockets as he walked down the deserted streets, glad to see they'd been correct about most of the other villains rushing to stake out their objectives in the first few minutes. Once the heroes arrived in a couple hours, this would be one of the only safe places to be recognizable as a villain, because the way the exercise was currently run, the civilians were definitely not on their side. They'd avoid it later, once they got their hands on some civilian tokens, but for now, this area had exactly what Hitoshi needed. Weapons. The pawn shop Izuku had told him to go to was at the bottom of a staircase in the middle of a dark alley, so about as shady as it could get. Hitoshi didn't bother knocking on the door before going inside. The most dangerous villains acted like they already owned everything and then worked to make that happen. So that's what he and Izuku were going to do. The man at the counter looked up as Hitoshi came in. "Hello there, you're a bit younger than my usual clientele, but I'm not one to turn away a customer." "I'm sure," Hitoshi said dryly. "I hear this is the best place to get weapons." The man grinned. "You heard right, you can call me Shiguro. What did you have in mind?" "The works," Hitoshi said smoothly. "I need at least 4 handguns and an assortment of knives, but I've recently come into a little cash, so I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got." Shiguro grinned and straightened up a bit. "Ooh, I always like a challenge, especially when it comes with deep pockets." He gestured for Hitoshi to wait and disappeared into the back room for a few minutes, which Hitoshi used to get a look around. There wasn't much to see, honestly, but that was as expected, and he ran through what he knew about the guy he was dealing with. He and Izuku had found a forum for past participants, and it seemed like everyone had something to say about this guy. From what he'd heard, this Ito guy seemed almost too good to be true. Because he was. Shiguro came back into the front with a large duffel bag. "Here you go, kid. Tell me what you think." Hitoshi gave him a worried look before taking the duffel and looking through it. There was a variety of handguns, shotguns, and a sniper rifle, which would definitely come in handy, as well as a few knives and explosives, which they wouldn't need to buy if everything went according to plan, but it was probably a good idea to have them, just in case the job later went south. Overall, it seemed like a good start, and they could always steal more later if they needed it. "Throw in a bit more ammo, and we call it good," Hitoshi said. "Hey, you've got a pretty good variety of goods here. How do you keep track of it all?" "Oh, it's my quirk," Shiguro said. "I have an insanely good memory, so everything I have and everything I get goes right up here in my big old brain and stays there. A lot less risky than keeping physical copies laying around for the police to find." Hitoshi nodded. "Yeah, that makes sense. So there's no physical record for what I'm buying. I just want to make sure, in case you try going to the police or something." "What? No, there's no copies." Shiguro put a hand on his heart. "I would never." Hitoshi smirked as he took control. "Good, that makes things easier. Forget you ever had any of the items in the duffel bag, and forget I was ever here while you're at it. Wait for 3 minutes after I've left before waking up." He left Shiguro slack-jawed at the counter and slung the duffel over his shoulder. Haru Shiguro, the pawn shop owner that appeared in the exercise every single year. His son was apparently participating in the exercise this year as a student, which was the only reason Hitoshi knew that he wasn't lying about his quirk. But it's not as if father and son were on opposite sides. From what the past participants had said, going to him was only a good idea if you plan on getting arrested the first few days. Somewhere on day 3 or 4, he turned traitor for the heroes and give them, from memory, everything they needed to track down every villain he'd sold to. It was a good thing that memories were finicky things. There was a slight sound of static in his ear, and Hitoshi winced as Izuku's voice came through a bit too loudly. "Toshi? Hitoshi? Can you hear me?" "Loud and clear, Izuku." Hitoshi groaned. "A bit too loud, actually." "Oh, sorry." Izuku continued speaking at a much more comfortable volume. "I have your next targets. Are you done at the pawn shop?" "Yep." Hitoshi hefted the duffel, knowing that Izuku was probably watching him. "Feel free to delete the footage of me coming and going. That guy won't remember I was ever there." "Good." Izuku was quiet for a short moment. "Done. Okay, are you ready for your target yet?" Hitoshi readjusted the duffel. "Yeah, shoot." He could practically hear Izuku smiling. Okay, so go to the main square. There's going to be a guy in his early 20s with pink hair. He's your target. Kyoka wandered the streets and walked into a cafe as she tried to figure out her first move. Despite it just being a training exercise, UA and HUC had turned the training grounds into a practically bustling city for the week, and she got the feeling that for the civilians, it was basically just life as normal. There were grocery stores, cafes, even theaters that were just going about their daily operations. So it was a good thing that each of the villains had been given a handful of cash to get them started. They were obviously expected to just steal more later, but the time before the heroes arrived was for setting up, not committing crimes. She was feeling kind of hungry, so she decided to stop at a cafe she passed where she waited. She got a few weird looks for her outfit, but nothing more than she usually did on a normal day, so she didn't really care. The line was really long, so she had a lot of time to think as she made her way to the front. She closed her eyes and both felt and heard one fall humming under her skin, slowly sinking with her heartbeat. It was both louder and somehow quieter than she had expected, and it almost felt like the power was trying to whisper so that it didn't hurt her ears. It would have been sweet if that was actually possible, but no. Kyoka was pretty sure it was all in her head. There was no way a power could whisper. "Hello there," a middle-aged woman smiled at her. "What can I get for you?" "A red bean cake?" Kyoka browsed the menu. "And a boba tea, if that's alright." "Coming right up." The cashier pressed a few buttons. "Token?" Kyoka frowned. "Token?" "Oh, most of the little shops in the exercise have us type that little participation token they gave you at the start. You know, that little disc they gave you when you showed up. That's kinda how we check that you're a part of the exercise and not some intruder. Plus, it helps the company track which places are popular and what to bring back next year, so we always try to scan them. I'm surprised you don't remember that from orientation." "Yeah." Kyoka frowned and pulled out her token. It seemed like it'd be pretty important. She put her token down on the counter, and the mood immediately shifted. If she hadn't known all these people were paid actors, she would have thought they were actually panicking. The cashier looked genuinely terrified as she stared down at Kyoka's red and black token. "It's a villain!" the lady cried out, a glint of challenge in her eyes as she watched for how Kyoka would react. "Somebody call the heroes!" Denki resisted the urge to restlessly pace back and forth. "Remind me why we're just waiting?" "Because the beginning of this exercise is going to be a bloodbath," Mom explained. "The minute that the heroes set foot inside the city, it's open season, so it's going to be a race to see if we can get the objectives before the heroes can get to us. Got it?" "Kinda." Denki looked down at the bank. "But why are we camping out so early? The heroes won't be here for another 2 hours." "Because we're racing the other villains." Mom laughed quietly. "Look over there. See anything odd?" Denki frowned and looked where Mom was pointing. Sure enough, there were people hiding in the shadows on the building next to them, just like they were hiding in the shadows on the rooftop. "Oh. So we're not gonna have to fight the heroes?" Denki gulped. "But we're gonna have to fight them?" Mom grinned. "Bingo!" Denki took a deep breath and thought about those 2 terrifying kids he'd seen at the orientation. Oh, joy. Nezu watched with interest as the Midoriya child drafted an email to the event coordinator for the HUC team using an email address that was just 1 letter off from his own. It was a brilliant piece of social engineering. But why did the boy want there to be a Ford charity event on day 3? Was he trying to lure the heroes? That wouldn't have much if it was just him and his friend against an entire class of heroes. He wasn't about to interfere and risk not finding out the boy's plan. It was impressive that he had hacked into Nezu's system so quickly. Honestly, it was impressive that he had tried at all, but his papa friend had been correct in assuming that Nezu had made the exercise network significantly easier to hack into than UA itself. Still, it showed a considerable amount of skill, and even though there were definitely areas of his technique that needed polishing, he got the job done. He'd singled out 2 seemingly random civilian files, and Nezu was still trying to figure out what he planned to do with them. He had a few suspicions, but it was more exciting at this point to see how things played out naturally. He was already intrigued, and the heroes hadn't even arrived on site yet. Spectacular! "A lot of the villains are already waiting for the heroes to come in," Cementos pointed out. "It's a smart play. It'll give them an advantage if they can pull off a robbery in those first few minutes." "And it looks like one of the middle schoolers has already gotten themselves into trouble," Aizawa sighed. "Predictable." "Come now, Aizawa, be fair," Ahmed insisted. It's not as if the villains were warned about the tokens proclaiming their status. They were warned, actually, Midnight said. It was just in the fine print and not in quite so many words. Plus, they're different colors, Aizawa said. It's only logical to assume he'd use them to separate them and tear them apart from the civilians in the game. I'm interested to see how she deals with being targeted like this. Gran Torino had insisted on attending to make sure young Jiro was alright, which Nezu had immediately approved. Hopefully, he'd be able to give a good example to All Might on how one should teach as well, because it had come to Nezu's attention that he still had a ways to go before he was ready for next year's classes. The heroes aren't there, so the best move would be either to rob the place for extra cash, if she's committed to the villain role, or just to turn tail and run. Both are decent options. I'm more concerned about those two Shadows kids, Midnight said. They've decided to divide and conquer, it looks like, but they don't have burner phones yet, so there's no way to communicate with one another. Nezu hid a grin behind his teacup. His teachers hadn't noticed that Midoriya had spent its entire time gaining access to the system. They would definitely be surprised when they realized that Midoriya was using their own comms to communicate. That was the thing about humans. They were always making assumptions about how the rules were supposed to work. It was going to be delightful to see them all proven wrong. The exercise officially started, and Jiro is going to get into trouble at the first, at the first cafe she goes into. And Izuku and Shinzo have plans. I'm excited about these few chapters. But anyways, guys, I hope you all enjoyed chapter 11 of Shadows the Horror Movie Heroes, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!